Hey, it's episode 24 of the Neoncast. Again, after a longish break, I guess. I don't know if you call it a break. It's more like me trying to figure out the format of what I'm doing and how and when. And I've been doing more streams, so, talking about things that are going on, in our collective realms of interest have been discussed in a format that you can all still watch and listen to, both on Twitch and on YouTube. Today we're going to talk a little about some video games as well as some shows and movies. There's going to be a couple of parts. I don't know. I'll see what how much I have to say about each thing and see how much I can squeeze in because of that. So as I said, I've been streaming a lot on Twitch, caught up in streaming some 360 games because I had gotten a capture card using Patreon support. Thank you, by the way. And was playing Dark Souls on 360 and kind of got pulled away from the thing I had been playing before all of that, which was NieR Automata. What had happened was, if you go to YouTube and you look at my playlist for the NieR Automata playthrough, I just finished uploading the last parts of it. I'll get to that in a second. If you go watch that playlist, you'll see that at some point around stream 12 or something like that, I stopped for a year, essentially. It was not a year. The streams that are on YouTube have a year of gap. What had happened was, if you look at the date of the last one that took place in 2018, you'll see that it's dated September 20th, which ended up being 4 days before I adopted my dog, Yoko. After which I didn't play anything for at least about 6 months, I would say. More than 6 months. Almost 8 months. Came back, played a little bit more NieR in March, something like that, but I don't know, I don't remember why I didn't upload those. And then I switched jobs, which again caused me to set down gaming for a little bit. I don't know, like my mental focus was focused on other things. Yeah, that's very eloquent. Good job. And then after I played Dark Souls for a while, I then got a Switch. One of my amazing Twitch subs bought me a Switch. And so then I started playing like Mario and Breath of the Wild, and now I'm playing Death Stranding as well. But I had to go back and finish NieR Automata. It was something in the back of my head a lot, which is unique, by the way. I'll play a bunch of games, get really into them, stop for whatever reason for like a couple of weeks, then feel like if I go back to it now, I'm going to have to like get used to the controls again and all that crap, and just kind of forget about it and figure, I'll go watch the ending on YouTube. NieR was not one of those games. I always felt like, this is all a temporary break, even though it's many months. I'm gonna do it, even if it requires starting over and playing the 20 or 30 hours that I got into it, just so that I would be in the right headspace to finish it. And then I did it. And let me tell you, I did not regret it. Not even slightly. In fact, I'm very happy that I did it. Because it was, probably one of the best games I've ever played. It's hard to get into that kind of qualitative ranking when you've been around video games for as long as I have and on as many different systems, experiencing the development of games technology, I mean, really from like the 8-bit Nintendo era up to now, but also having been away from gaming for several long segments of that entire period, playing PC games and not console games, playing console games but not PC games. So creating a rank of the best games ever is not, I never liked big lists like that. Your favorite movie of all time. I don't know, like what genre, what decade, that kind of thing. And so I'll say, I'll amend that slightly from saying it's one of the best games I've ever played. From one of the best games of all time to say it's one of the best games I've ever played in the sense that it was the play experience was one of the best I've ever experienced. Again, being eloquent and saying the experience was the best I've ever experienced. You can tell I haven't done this in a while. But it was a completely singularly unique experience, which in this day and age is really hard to achieve. I mean, if you go back to look at some of the other games that I would consider some of the greatest games of all times, aside from the timeless classics, Doom, whatever. I'll take something like Medal of Honor Allied Assault, which was one of or maybe the first shooter I played that was it had complex mission. It was complex mission based, story based, and had a lot of story beats in it, like during the gameplay, which was something I didn't really experience before. Duke Nukem 3D, Doom, like I said. It's more like, here's a map, go kill some aliens. This was more like, go take out this thing, and here's how you do it, and you got to sneak up behind the people, and here's a resistance member you got to go help, and then they have that classic Normandy storming the beach mission, which was it blew my mind at the time. But as years go by, that kind of unexpected thing in a game is getting harder to achieve. It's a lot harder to surprise people and give them something totally unique. I mean, I played the famous meme game Doki Doki Literature Club recently, and that also gave me a little bit of that, obviously on a sort of lesser level, but it is a very special game on more than one level in more than one way. It's just less of a, like an immersive world experience. It's just something that subverts your expectations from both the genre that it's part of, like the visual, the sort of anime style harem visual novel, and your expectations about video games in general, which Automata also does, but in a far more emotionally intense way. So, I mean, that was also, and I was very impressed by it, and I spoke about how impressed I was by Doki Doki because of those elements. Because, making a VN like that with cute girls and then just having it turn violent is not unique in anime, certainly. I mean, there's like 20 years worth of examples of this, of using the cuteness and the innocence of anime to blindside you with something very mature and often very graphic. And even there's plenty of VNs that do this, but also plenty of anime, like some of the most famous sort of horror or psychological drama / thrillers play on that trope of like, oh, here are cute girls, let's throw them into a really, really fucked up situation. But NieR does stuff that truly makes you feel like the game is requiring somewhat of an emotional price for you to pay. And you could argue that any game that makes you feel sad or angry or something like that requires an emotional price. But this is different because the only currency you pay with for that emotional price is the currency of emotion and time, maybe like time spent sad or time spent angry or time spent tense or afraid. So you're sacrificing positive emotion for a certain length of time, and that's the price that you pay. This does something more than that, much more. It's, I can't really discuss it without spoilers. I don't know if I should or shouldn't, because people still pick up this game. Someone told me yesterday that they bought it because of my recommendation. But I will say it's one of those games you got to play through multiple times, and then after a couple of times that you play through it, it takes a big turn. And it keeps pushing beyond the ending of the story. Because you play through the game once and the story ends. Nominally, it ends. And in theory, you could just walk away from the game at that moment. And yeah, there's a bunch of like loose plot ends. And maybe it'll feel a little unsatisfying, a little anticlimactic. I know that's how I felt when I finished Route A. I think you can even go watch. I don't remember how much of it I said and how much of it was just my feeling and what I thought inside my head. But I do remember thinking, okay, cool. This game was pretty cool. All the designs were pretty cool. Some really weird shit happened that I didn't expect. It had like a sad ending. The end. Okay, whatever. And then the second playthrough, which is initially playing through the same events, but playing as the second character, as the character that is the main NPC in the first playthrough. And there are sections of the game where the two characters are separated, and so then you experience what happened to that NPC during the times that they were separated. But that's about it. I mean, there's a couple more bits of info that you learn that were hidden from you in the initial playthrough. But again, you get to the end and it ends in the same way. And I think that's the point where a lot of people maybe got bored or decided that they're not going to have a lot more to gain from this. And boy, if you walk away from the game after ending B, you're basically abandoning the game in the middle. You could think of this as an episode of a show that plays twice. There's actually a famous, I can't remember what the show's called. It's like a British show, and then there was an American remake. And there's a really funny episode of it where one of the characters, it's kind of like Friends, but British. I just can't remember the name. I'm sure somebody in the comments will remember, or I'll Google it later. But there was like a classic episode of that show where one of the characters is dating an Israeli girl who speaks no English at all. And so the entire episode, she says stuff in Hebrew, and he'll sort of cheekily say like, "Oh my God, you're so beautiful. I don't know what you're saying," or something like that. And then halfway through the episode, the events replay from the beginning. But now the woman is speaking English and everybody else is speaking like gibberish. And so if you don't know Hebrew, I mean, I knew Hebrew, so I got a different sort of perspective of it. But just imagine for a second that for the first half of the episode, the woman speaks a language that you don't understand, and all the rest of the cast speak a language you do understand. And then it flips, and that character speaks a language that you do understand, and all the other ones speak gibberish, or a language you don't understand. And so then a lot of kind of gags that are set up in the first half then pay off in the second half. It's very clever. This does that a little bit, but then imagine that episode was a two-parter, okay? And so that then after that happens, that whole incident or whatever, there's a whole like payoff to that story. That isn't the whole story. That's the setup for the story. And that's how NieR functions, basically. It tells you the events of these two characters from the perspective of both of them, and then it tells you more of the story. It takes a step back, and then it does that again, and then it does that again. again, in ways that I don't want to get into, but it gets very meta, or as some people call it, extra diegetic. That's all I'll say. Any more than that, and I might be giving away too much. But as I said, a unique gaming experience with a truly impactful story. Meaning, like it like I said, it requires a toll. You do not experience the true ending of this game unless you're willing to pay for it. And like I said, it's not a microtransaction thing. Anyway, that's all I'll say about it. It's a masterpiece. It's gonna have a sequel, and who knows if it'll be a sequel to this story. It probably won't. It'll probably be another story in this universe in the same way that the first NieR and also the Drakengard games were loosely tied into each other. This game has references to NieR that I didn't get. Luckily, I had people in chat to kind of fill me in on it a little, and then I also watched a couple of analysis videos that explained connections to NieR. But I fully expect the next game to have very little to do with this. I might be wrong. I may be totally wrong, considering how popular not just this game is, but the characters in it and stuff. So it might be like a direct sequel, even though who the fuck knows how to do that. Then again, like Madoka the anime did not seem like it could have a sequel, and then it had a brilliant sequel that made they made it make total sense in universe, which I love. I love when a story feels like it can't have a sequel, and then it gets a sequel that actually makes sense. That's really cool. It's kind of rare, because retconning stuff in order to shove a sequel in is not a good thing, and is usually sequels like this usually come about because of the popularity of the first season or the first game, even though there is typically no intention of extending the story beyond that initial run. And so then you're kind of forced to figure out how to make more story. And so if within those confines you're able to do something cool, then fucking cool. And that's about it on NieR. Again, if you have a system that can play it, if you're willing to sacrifice, 30, 40, 50 hours, and that's if you don't 100% it. 100%ing it takes way longer. I think I played through it for about 45 hours, but messed around a bunch. Several hours of that was just me exploring the world, farming for stuff, that kind of thing. I don't know. I think maybe you could probably finish it between 20 and 30 hours if you just go through the main story, and that's about it. So if you have that kind of time to invest and you really want something that'll hit you in ways that I don't think any other game will have. I haven't played every game out there, so I don't know if other games do something that is that gut punchy in a personal way. But if you played something like that and liked it, then yeah, this is another example of that, certainly. I wrote down a couple more games to discuss, but I don't really have a lot to say about them right now. Death Stranding that I'm playing right now, there's been how much has been written and said about it already, let alone before it came out. I will say that right now it's not sucking me in particularly. It's getting bogged down in my opinion, in game elements, which I heard was a problem with Metal Gear Solid 5. Kojima's, magnum opus for that franchise. Thus far, it keeps introducing more mechanics. This thing wears out, and this thing builds up to that, and these things need to be combined, and these things need to be brought up and restricted and upgraded and buffed and all that stuff. I do enjoy the terrain traversal because it forces you to think in the same way that you would if you were doing it yourself. If you're hiking and you got to get up some rocks or go around obstacles and keep your balance when going downhill, not just like running full bore down a slope like you would in, practically every other third person, first person game. But yeah, I'll see. I'm going to give it some more time. People said that once you get to episode 3, I think that's when like fast travel opens up, and then you can do a bunch of things rather than having to like walk for a long time from one place to the other, deal with obstacles along the way that are not super engaging. Some of them are. Some of the stealth I think is really cool, intense. But some of the other stuff you have to contend with during your travel is not super exciting or whatever. But we'll see. The story is interesting. The world is very interesting and weird. It's a beautiful game despite being very bleak and kind of monochrome. The motion capture and facial capture are groundbreaking. I don't know. Again, I don't play every new big game out there, but it's good. It's very good. It's incredibly good. And I always enjoy owning a gaming system and seeing how much better it's exploited as its life goes on, and then by the end of its lifetime, they're really pushing it hard with what it can do. That also happened with 360. If you look at new 360 games, I mean, like early 360 games as opposed to late ones, I mean, they really improved. I thought Dark Souls on 360 looked amazing. I don't know if it's early or late. I hear that it's, obviously a million times better in the remastered version, whatever. And there are sections of it where the machine just bogs down in frame rate. Blight Town is sort of humorously called Frame Town, I think. That was really annoying. But that wasn't the look. That was the horsepower. So yeah, Death Stranding, really beautiful, intriguing story, weird Kojima-isms, and the gameplay right now is the thing that I'm least attracted to about it. I think the next game I'm gonna pick up, I played Astral Chain once. I bought it and I played it once. And I want to play it again. I think I was like really drunk when I played it the first time. It was like late at night and I was doing a stream of something else. And then I just decided to pop it on, and I was having a lot of trouble with the fight mechanics. And so I was like, I don't know. Is this even any good? But I was not in the right state of mind to play it. And so perhaps a second go around will be good. Witcher 3 I want to get. I've been being pestered by people to play Witcher 3 for a while. And I actually kind of got myself kind of excited about it. It seems really cool. Initially I was like, really? Yeah, open world, medieval game, but people love it. And speaking of open world games, I'm also playing Breath of the Wild on Switch, a game that I've wanted to play since it came out, and watched a lot of people stream it because I didn't think I would ever get around to it. I didn't have a Switch. I wasn't really intending on getting a Switch at the time. And oh boy, is that game great. It's just as great as I expected it to be from watching people play it. The environmentals in it are just spectacular. And by that, I don't just mean like weather. I mean like its world engine is very clever. Like the things that you would think you would be able to do in it, you're able to do in it. And by that, I mean, for example, I had to set a brush on fire so that I could get past it, like a thorn, like a big thorn bush kind of thing. As you would in a Zelda game. But I didn't have fire arrows. But what you can do is you can light a bonfire and then shoot a regular arrow through it, which lights it on fire and burns the bushes. That's a great, like I said, that's a great environmental engine or world engine. I don't know how you want to call it. Where I remember in old games, uh, invisible walls weren't just invisible walls. There were also invisible actions, like invisible walls regarding actions, not just movement, meaning something would make total sense to you as a solution to a problem in a game. Oh, I have this item, a rope. I could just tie this around a rope. But if the game did not want you to do it like that, then you couldn't have done it like that. And that breaks immersion a little because you're like, fuck, my character has a rope. And so I got to go get a chain instead of a rope, even though a rope would be okay here because the game decided that the rope is for something else, and for this you need a chain. And Breath of the Wild, I don't know if it has that. I wouldn't be surprised if it does, because just in some places you just need that. Again, as gamified elements. Oh, you need to get this specific item because it's the only thing that'll let you do that action. But generally speaking, the game gives you the leeway to be clever about how you solve certain problems in the game. And that's a relatively unique experience for me. I also feel like the exploration there is more rewarding than it was in some of the other open world games that I've played. Maybe not San Andreas, which again is, I think, one of my biggest all-time favorites. I also think it probably deserves a spot on the greatest, if somebody ever compiled a really thoughtful list of the greatest games ever. I think that probably deserves to be on there. A lot of people say Vice City. I like Vice City. I think San Andreas does a couple of, it builds on it a little more it's basically to me like the Mac Daddy of all open world games now. The amount of stuff that it lets you do, considering when it came out, is really impressive. I played Horizon Zero Dawn, another game I have lots of streams on YouTube for. The exploration there felt less rewarding. I did find cool shit. I did wander around the map, and all of a sudden I found this place where there were big old decrepit satellite dishes and stuff like that, which I like. I don't need. You know what? I'll amend that slightly. It's not that I don't need every cool place that I discover to have something associated with it, an action, an item, something like that. But it is nice when that happens. And Horizon Zero Dawn is a teeny bit limited with the stuff that it does, meaning there's weapons, there's armor. Breath of the Wild, you can find very interesting random stuff just strewn about. Shrines that have maybe unique items in them, weird NPCs, and then you got all the stuff like the Korok seeds, the lost memories. And so wandering around, you will actually stumble into things that you require for completionist runs, things you didn't expect to discover, new things. I don't know, the recycling of assets in this game is very low, it feels like, meaning, they'll recycle the way the stable looks, sprites of enemies, certain layouts of bokoblin camps and things like that, and obviously shrines and towers, but the landscape, not a lot of asset recycling going on there. The villages, Hateno Village and Kakariko Village, look extremely different, have different music, different clothes, different layouts to buildings. It's just an entirely different style. And then also that obviously extends into Gerudo and Zora. I just haven't been there yet, but I know that they're all different. The cooking, the everything. Everything about it is engaging. I love the art style. I feel like games like that are going to be more timeless than games like Death Stranding or Horizon Zero Dawn. The graphics of it might look outdated way before Breath of the Wild. Cartoony things that have a good visual style hold up forever. Go look at some of the LucasArts games from the 90s, Sam and Max, Full Throttle, Grim Fandango, all games that look great now Full Throttle looks great. It's just a cartoon. Just looks like a cool looking cartoon. And that doesn't, you watch cartoons now from the 40s and the 50s, and they just still look like cartoons, and they're dated way less. Well, there aren't exactly like, polygonal CGI going on in the 50s. But, like early, like look at Virtua Fighter. How about this? Compare Street Fighter 2 to Virtua Fighter, a much newer game. Or even like the original Mortal Kombat, which at the time was considered graphically groundbreaking. I would say Street Fighter 2 holds up way better than either of those games in the visual department. I mean, Virtua Fighter has like clownishly bad controls, but I felt like at the time, like I remember playing that in an arcade, like in an actual go to an arcade, and never questioning the quality of the controls. It was just the game was so like unique and new, and I was like, this is awesome. I love this so much. But like I said, the more cartoony, the games that don't go for realism end up lasting longer than the games that do. And that's about it. Switch. I wasn't going to get a Switch. I love it now. I didn't expect to love it. I remember thinking the idea for it was kind of dumb, but now I totally get it. It's actually a unique experience. It's actually very different from owning a PlayStation or an Xbox. I don't own an Xbox One, but I feel like if I get it, it'll just feel like a PlayStation 4, with other games and looking a little different, and the controller has a slightly different configuration. But it would be a very similar gaming experience to a PlayStation 4. Switch, on the other hand, feels like a very different gaming experience. The type of games you play on it, the way it functions as a device that you use, like I said, you go on the go with it and stuff. I'm playing like old Nintendo games on it. I actually got 2 separate controllers for it, specifically because older games are easier to play on a controller where the D-pad is on the same height level as the buttons, which on a Switch Pro or an Xbox 360 controller is not the case. The analog sticks are offset to each other, so it makes your hand feels like it should play with an analog stick instead of a D-pad, and that's just not as convenient for a lot of old NES games, but also like Mario Maker or Tetris 99 doesn't feel good for me with those controllers. So I bought an 8-bit DOE controller that looks like a Super Nintendo, but also has the analog sticks in the way of a PlayStation, where the 2 analog sticks are in the bottom, and then in the top you got your D-pad and your buttons, which if you grip it like that feels like an old style controller. So yeah, love the Switch, love streaming. Patreon and Twitch money has been instrumental in letting me do this, enabling me to buy new games, enabling me to set up an environment that's comfortable and conducive to doing this more often. Otherwise, I would have to like set it up each time, and it would take time, and I wouldn't be able to. I wouldn't feel like doing it, and now it really is like a 5-minute. Turn everything on, adjust the monitors so that they're kind of in front of my seat in a convenient way, and hitting a button, and I'm going, and that's it. I really, really hope in the new year to start establishing a regular streaming schedule, which I haven't really done yet because my job situation until then is still a little fluid. It's a little hard for me to plan for a schedule right now. It'll get easier, hopefully, like I said, in the new year. But until then, I just do as much as I can when I can, when I got the energy and I feel like I can put on a good show. And I can't believe I took 35 minutes to get to this, but, I unmasked recently. And so my streams are now with Cam. I'm not just putting my real name out there on my Twitter profile or my picture. I mean, I might. I'm not doing it to avoid doing it. I just, like, who cares? Like, my name isn't important. And I love the Twitter picture I have right now because it is adorable in sort of galactic levels of cuteness. But yeah, and I know a lot of people like cam streams better. I know I do. I know I would much rather watch someone play, and I know that there's a face there, and then if something cool happens, you can see their actual reaction. And so hopefully that'll be more entertaining for you guys and sort of more fun for me. There's just less stress involved with not worrying about your stuff getting out there unplanned. I know I did one of the first streams I did that had Yoko Cam on it. The fire alarm went off in my building, and Yoko got really distressed. And without thinking, I stepped away from my computer and got down on the floor to hug her, right in full view of the camera. I had my back turned to it, and I had headphones on, so you can't really see what I look like. But then later, everyone was like, dude, your face. And I went and I looked on the stream, and I was like, all right, now look, if it had happened, no big deal. Like I said, for the past year, I've been in a situation where if it happened, it wouldn't have ruined my life. Like I wasn't in a place where I was like hiding it in fear of stuff. I just, I figured like it's my decision. It's my decision. My levels of personal privacy are nobody's business. But some things that happened recently that I spoke about on stream just made it unnecessary. I don't know. I got doxxed a couple of times, and at some point it started to not matter. It began to be a case of the only people walking around the internet who knew who I was were people who hated me, and that's dumb. Like if the people who hate me know who I am, why not the people who like me? I mean, doesn't that make more sense? Like at some point, all I'm doing is hiding it from people who like are quote unquote on my side, while the people who are on the opposite side have all figured it out already. And by figured it out, I don't mean like, oh, I'm someone, because I kept saying like the main thing about me is that I wasn't like a person who had a public account under their real name, but also a hidden account with a pseudonym where they could just say whatever they want with no consequence. That was never it. Which is also why I never really gave a shit about the implications of my identity getting out there or something like that. But yeah, cam streams from now on, which is going to be cool, I think. And so that's about it about games. We'll see what happens with games. Witcher 3, maybe Dark Souls 3. We'll see what comes out next year. Cyberpunk 2077, is that what it's called? The one with Keanu Reeves? Maybe I'll play that when it comes out. We'll see. A couple more things. I've been watching Watchmen on HBO. It's been very controversial. I love it. Just gotta maybe briefly tell you that Watchmen is I think worth your time and worth sticking with until like episode 5. I know it's only 8 long, but some shows that in retrospect are really well paced don't feel well paced when you're watching them, because you don't know if stuff is going to pay off and how it's going to pay off. And then often payoffs make you think back on the setup as better than you initially intended. And I think that's also, we're going to get to Star Wars in a minute, but I also think that that's probably why I end up disliking Star Wars movies more as time goes on. If you go listen to the Neoncast episode about Solo that I did, where I revisited The Last Jedi, I watched it again after not having watched it in a year and having kind of liked it the first time, or at least remembering that I liked it the first time, and getting new insight into how I actually didn't like it. And some of that had to do with setups not paying off. And in that episode, I discuss how Batman v Superman kind of ruined my love of Man of Steel because I anticipated it to pay off things that were set up in Man of Steel and didn't. And so with something like Watchmen, I'm already seeing payoff that's satisfying by episode 5. And if they don't like botch the landing and continue to pay off the setup, in retrospect, it will look like a very well-paced miniseries. I don't know if Lindelof is going to leave us with cliffhangers that then the show won't get renewed and will never get paid off. And that will ruin it for me, basically. It won't take away from the really cool stuff that it's done so far. But yeah, ultimately it'll feel like a big miss, kind of like Game of Thrones. Like I wouldn't recommend somebody binge the entire show now. If somebody said to me, I've never watched Game of Thrones, should I just binge it all? And I won't just go like, yes. Like if somebody said Breaking Bad or The Wire or The Shield, where I would just say like, yes, go watch it. Yes. Game of Thrones has to come with a lot of qualifiers. Like, yeah, you should watch it, but, be aware that later on it gets, like it's not a wholehearted recommendation. And it's because of how it ended up, even though the earlier parts were great. And just one more thing I want to say about Watchmen. Like I feel like it functions really well as a snapshot of the world of Watchmen 30 years after the incident. It's called 11-2 in the show. I don't remember if it was. I don't think it was called 11-2 in the books because this is obviously a play on 9/11. I think it was just called the incident or something in New York, something like that. It might have not even been named because it was like the end of the story. And I like that it has that same absurdity. There's like absurdity in the world that feels very Watchmen. Like I'll give you an example that's not spoilery. In the most recent episode, one of the characters' ex-wife, he has to go talk to her about something, and she's like a geneticist or something like that. And she works for a place that like clones people's animals, make a clone of somebody's dog if they die. And there's like a commercial on TV for it, like never lose your pet forever with forever genes or something like that. And so he gets there and she's just in the process of like comparing a clone that she made of a puppy to like the real puppy. And she says to him, give me your honest answer. Do these two look identical? And he kind of looks at him and he says, nah, the clone's just a little too small. And she says, okay, would you like it? And he says, no, what would I do with the dog? And she says, all right, and unceremoniously puts it in like an incinerator, like puts it in a little drawer, closes the drawer, hits a button, and you hear like a like it just got like instantly incinerated. And that's, first of all, that's horrific, right? And I was like, I was not prepared to see that. But that is a very much, to me, kind of an example of that, how weird and fucked up that world was. And it had absurdities in it of that sort. Like Nixon being president for 20 years and that kind of thing. And rich industrialists creating monsters and killing millions of people. Now, the big thing that people are talking about Watchmen, a big reason that a lot of people love it and a big reason a lot of people hate it, is the politics, the wokeness. Now, I think we don't need to get into Alan Moore and how the original Watchmen is in itself a big piece of leftist propaganda in a sense. I think it does something a little more clever than just liberal propaganda, if that's what you want to call it. I find that term kind of cringy, but Alan Moore laying out his liberal worldview. I'd say V for Vendetta is a little more that, is a little less subtle and a little less nuanced in its sort of liberalism and critique of like the right wing and fascism and stuff like that. Watchmen is a little more subtle and a little more clever in the sense that the bad guys are weirdly altruistic and win at the end, and the only person who's an unflinching good guy in it is like a psycho, like a literal insane psycho who ends up dying because of his refusal to like do the thing that's morally wrong, but literally just saved the world. And so complaining that the new Watchmen, is woke, has woke politics, is to me a bizarre criticism. Like, what were you expecting exactly? But, and this is a big but, which I like, and I cannot lie. I think it's a work. I think it's a little bit of a misdirect. I think the wokeness is not entirely sincere. And look, some of it is fine. I think that, it's perfectly fine to like explore the racist past of America and how that translates to problems with police today and things like that, and the rise of white supremacy, like the recent resurgence of white supremacy. I think those are topics worth exploring in media, certainly. If you do it well, if you don't do it obnoxiously. I watched Robin Hood, the most recent Robin Hood, Chav Robin Hood, with Taron Egerton yesterday, and that's a great example of a one that's done so poorly that like I was visibly cringing at the stuff they were saying and how it was like, it sounded like a Twitter thread talking about like Bush and the Iraq War translated into like the sheriff of Nottingham giving a speech about the Crusades. And those Muslims, we're going to go over there and democratize them. They hate us because of our freedom. He literally said these things. Like I'm not even paraphrasing. He was like, they hate us for our freedoms, and they think we're going to fight a war far from home, but that is actually our home. It was like grabbing my head. Meanwhile, Watchmen is slowly starting to imply that the people it was very ham-handedly setting up as the bad guys are actually potentially the good guys. I mean, and by potentially the good guys, I mean they're a terrorist group who like murder cops and shit, but it turns out that they're kind of saving the world. And it's funny because they all look like Rorschach, right? They're like almost like a Rorschach-ian cult, and turns out their history's repeating a little bit. And these psychos are actually the ones who are unflinching in their like moral imperative for the world. Are clearly villains and do villainous shit for it. Kind of like what Adrian Veidt did in the original, where he was like, I'll kill 3 million people, but save hundreds of millions in the process. But the way they showed this in episode 5 really made me think, like, is this show actually implying that woke people can be like just as bad as white nationalists? I mean, maybe, or not that they are as bad, but that people are capable of doing things that are as bad for causes like social justice, environmentalism, world peace, that people are willing to do things that are as horrific as things that people do for like evil causes, racial supremacy, stuff like that. And that is, even if that's not the ultimate point, the fact that it even explores this notion is already to me a sign that it's actually well thought out and not just an example of like, here's a great example of here's a great chance for us to make a black woman the main character and make this about racism, which both of those things do exist there in a large part. But I mean, why not? Why wouldn't a black woman who's a cop in Tulsa, where there happens to be a resurgence of like a white supremacist gang or militia in this show, why wouldn't there be themes of racism explored in it? It actually would kind of feel weird if there weren't. And I do feel like some people get a little too reactionary in their aversion to like wokeness in media, to the point that any kind of thing like that will immediately cause them to go like, oh, here we go again. In the same way that like an SJW will think if it's some movie starring a white guy, and they'll say like, here, like Joker, here we go, another movie about a frustrated white man. And it's like, you have, first of all, you haven't even seen it yet. People were saying this before Joker even came out, and saying, oh, it's the Citizen Kane of incels and it's going to inspire violence. And it didn't, and it wasn't the Citizen Kane of incels. and it was a more, the story was very basic, but it was the character that Joaquin Phoenix played was way more interesting than just man who has bad things happen to him and then becomes a villain and lashes out and is actually a sympathetic villain because society kicked him when he was down. That's not it at all. The preemptive hysteria over it also pushed it over $1 billion globally, which is kind of amazing. But in that same sense, every time, Commissioner Gordon in the new Batman movie is going to be Jeffrey Wright, who's black. And people lost their fucking minds over it. Why? Who cares? Harvey Dent was black in the 1989 Batman. And they were like setting him up to be Two-Face. What does it matter? There's plenty of... There are characters. You can't really make Magneto black. Magneto's existence as a Jew who survived Auschwitz is kind of critical to his character, and making him anything else. I mean, you can, obviously. What if stories and Elseworld stories is a thing that exists, and you can specifically decide that you're going to change the story around. But you can't do that without expecting some backlash, especially if you kind of do it with a progressive tint. But on the other hand, there's plenty of characters that you can easily just make a woman or a different race just because why not? And also I said when, this whole argument about Jeffrey Wright was going on, I was saying like, what if Jeffrey Wright just showed up to audition for Commissioner Gordon and like knocked it out of the park, did exactly what the director envisioned in his mind that this Commissioner Gordon would look like, and so that's why he got the role. People assume that every time a character that was originally a man or was originally white is now a woman or a black woman or gay, I don't know what, that it was some kind of like directive or that the thought process behind it was political rather than the director, like some actress saying like, can I please audition for this role? Or maybe a writer thinking of a clever thing to do with this character that would necessitate it being a woman in the script. Or as I said, somebody just showing up for an audition and fucking killing it. And then it being more important that the actor deliver the kind of performance that the director wants for his movie than him being canonically fucking white. And it's Commissioner Gordon, so it doesn't matter. And the counter arguments that people gave me, like his wife is supposed to be redheaded because of the Killing Joke. It's like, really? That's your reasoning, that you're mad that they're making Commissioner Gordon black in this universe that might not even have the Killing Joke in it? Like, who gives a shit? It doesn't matter. And I feel like that level of reactionary anger is non-conducive. Be cool. If it doesn't matter, then show that you're not like the people who just want everything to be like that now. Show that you're more easygoing. You will go with the flow, and you will not gatekeep, if I can use that term, media in an unreasonable way like they want to. Be reasonable about it. Heimdall and Thor being black, totally not a big deal. They're Norse gods-ish that are actually aliens, and really, that doesn't matter. I even think it doesn't matter for James Bond. I don't think it matters if James Bond will be black or a woman. Because again, there's fucking 50 of them. So stepping outside of that and doing something different is not non-offensive to me. But like I said, sometimes it does matter, and sometimes it also just feels lame. I still think that Scarlett Johansson in Ghost in the Shell was weird, not because at the time, like I said to people, technically she's a robot, she's in an android body, it doesn't really matter what race she is, but they leaned really heavily into her being Japanese in it, that made it weird. So if it doesn't fit within the story you're trying to tell, then making a character white who's supposed to be Asian or vice versa becomes jarring and starts to feel like a cynical, non-creative choice. And yes, I understand that you want to sell your movie, and so you want a big actress in it. Again, these are all arguments I made at the time, but you can't you can't do that if your story revolves around the character being Asian. Just change it. Just put it in America. Don't make it a Japanese movie in that case. Don't just have two Japanese characters in it and everybody else is not Japanese and everybody speaks English except for Takeshi Kitano. It was just really jarring. It was really jarring, and that was a great example of, and I said, like, that was one of the rare examples where I said, this is whitewashing. When people talk about whitewashing, they can talk about Breakfast at Tiffany's and, and Jerry Lewis putting in buck teeth and pretending to be Chinese and stuff like this. There's a lot of stuff that's called whitewashing that I totally resist the urge to call whitewashing. I would even say the Ancient One in Doctor Strange. The only reason I would accuse that of it's not actually whitewashing. It's more like Tibet washing in that case. And that was made to appease China. I find that very offensive, but for politics, not a race. They didn't do it because Tilda Swinton is white. I think the choice to go with Tilda Swinton was because they felt like they couldn't make the Ancient One like Tibetan, so they were like, we'll pick Tilda Swinton because she's weird and looks kind of androgynous, and also you can't really figure out where she's from, especially if she's bald. So that's, I feel like it worked. Just the motives behind it were disturbing. So yeah, I think Watchmen is definitely worth checking out. I like weird. I like the visuals. I think the visuals are good. I think it has good characters, very Watchmen-y characters. Yeah, so check that out. Looks like I'm running kind of long. I don't know if I'm going to spend a long time talking about Star Wars. I just wanted to say that The Mandalorian thus far is really cool. It's really understated. It really does feel like a throwback to the original. We'll see how it goes. Thus far, everyone seems to be on board with it, loving the little Yoda alien, loving Nick Nolte, loving the actual character of the Mandalorian. Like I said, the look is kind of grungy. I love his ship. It looks very cool. It's like a new Star Wars-y thing that looks very in Star Wars, instead of just giving him another Slave One type ship, which could have easily happened and been super lame. They gave him a different kind of ship that's, like I said, that's sort of its own thing, very unique in its own look. So we'll see how that goes. Rise of Skywalker, a month away. Very few people are excited about it. I'm excited about it in the same way that you're excited about driving by a gigantic car crash. I need to see what happens. I have a burning physical desire to see how they tried, to see the results of the scramble to fucking fix this. Like the new Sonic trailers started coming out with the updated Sonic look after Backlash caused him to go back to the drawing board. And people seem really happy. I mean, first of all, he looks infinitely better, certainly. And the fans are happy, not just with how he looks, but with the fact that they were actually listened to. And I really hope there will be fan a dedication to making it succeed. And, again, I don't think that movies should function in this way generally, like listen to Twitter outrage and just go change stuff because fans online are angry. But this was an example where fans of Sonic were just scratching their heads like, why would you do this? Like, what is the reason that you're making him look weird and not like the character that we love? It's not just like, oh, they changed a plot element and they made him, I don't know what, or they put him in our world and people don't like that. It really was like, if Pikachu in Detective Pikachu looked totally different from the Pikachu in the Pokemon series, people would have flipped out in the same way. And so I hope it succeeds, just more so, again, not because of the fact that I want movies to readjust because of backlash, and more in the sense that I think it's important for movies to listen to the fan base from the get-go. I think that's what ultimately led Marvel to its success was instead of making something that appealed to wide audiences but winked at the fans, they made something that appeals to fans but winks at wide audiences. And that has thus far proven to be a pretty winning formula. Joker did the same thing, except that it didn't do it for fans of comic books. It did it for fans of like film, essentially. But comic book fans, because they're looking for offbeat, interesting treatments of characters like that, drove, I think, the more general audiences to see it as well. But the Rise of Skywalker is a different story. Here, the retcon is like a salvage attempt. It's just an attempt to, make the best of a really shitty situation. And I think once it comes out, I'm going to do a long episode just talking about the entire thing. I did a little bit of that in my solo / Last Jedi Revisited episode, but it really needs some more discussion about how easily avoidable this entire fuck up was, especially considering the people involved, the creative forces, and the utter ease of success if you just did the thing that everybody wanted for 30 years instead of trying to deliberately break that. It backfired. It backfired horribly. There's very little excitement. There was a lot of excitement about The Force Awakens. There was a lot of excitement about The Last Jedi, and not just fan excitement. There was normie excitement. Regular people who, are aware of Star Wars, like Star Wars, aren't big fans, won't be able to tell you the names of all the planets and all that crap, but, enjoy a Star Wars movie. We're pretty hyped about the last two. And also, I think to a certain extent, Rogue One. Nobody was excited about Solo. And I don't see excitement about this. And it will be very interesting to see how much money it makes. I mean, it almost certainly will make a lot of money. But so did Batman v Superman. In an objective, the literal number of dollars that it made is a high sum. But overall, it was considered a flop because of how much money they had to spend on it. And how much money you expect in return for a movie like Batman v Superman. It's you're managing expectations. You expect to make bank on a movie like that, like huge bank. If Infinity War had made $1 billion, had only made $1 billion, only, I say. $1 billion is lots of money. Joker made $1 billion, and it's considered an amazing feat. It's the highest grossing R-rated movie ever. If Endgame had made $1 billion, that would have meant something was wrong with it. That would have been an indicator that a lot of people were unhappy with it. Believe it or not, despite making $1 billion. Because it sits on such a franchise, and because it involves so much talent, and because it's been built up for so long, it needed to make fuck tons of money to be considered to have delivered properly on what it was. And it actually even exceeded that. I didn't think anything would have ever beaten Avatar for various logistical reasons. And it still managed to do it. It still managed to do it. I'm happy that it managed to do it. It's really cool to see a movie that's a sequel to sequels, and a comic book movie where a purple monster deletes all of the half of the universe, and then a bunch of superheroes in costumes fight him off, is the highest grossing movie of all time. That's kind of heartwarming. I know some people say, "Oh, Disney corporate." I'm saying it's heartwarming for someone who's always enjoyed this kind of thing and always felt like it deserved more recognition for being cool and fun and something that people who aren't nerds can enjoy. Yeah, so that's that. 1 month to go. There's definitely going to be an episode about that. I'll possibly record it, the weekend that I go see it. I think I'm going to see it opening night. So stay tuned for that. And I think on that note, I'm going to wrap things up on episode 24 of this Neoncast. Check out the NieR Automata streams that just got uploaded to YouTube at youtube.com/c/Neontaster. That's where you're probably listening to this. It's still not up on a podcast service. I still got to look into it. It's just kind of not my world. So I like the podcast hosting, I just got to look into it a little and see how that stuff works. Twitch.tv/Neontaster is where you go to watch all of those beautiful streams. You can subscribe to me or give me some bits if you want. That's always great. I've had some amazing generosity. Same on Patreon, patreon.com/Neontaster. You patrons are basically responsible for all of this shit, for the thing that I'm recording on right now, for the ability to even do it in the first place. So yeah, thank you for listening to episode 24. If you have been listening, and if not, then why am I talking to you?